My name is Aubrey Williams, 67 years young and recently widowed. After Frank passed, I moved in with my son Travis and his wife Amanda, bringing along my family recipes and holiday traditions. I never expected that Thanksgiving dinner would become a battlefield. When Amanda snatched my plate away mid-bite and announced to everyone that I had eaten enough, something inside me broke. But what she never saw coming was that I still had fight left in me. Before I tell you how I turned the tables on someone who tried to shame me at my own dinner table, let me know where you are watching from, and hit that subscribe button if you believe respect should never expire with age. Frank and I were married for 40 wonderful years. He was my rock, my partner in everything from raising our son to building our beautiful colonial home on Maple Street. When he passed away from heart failure 3 years ago, it felt like half of me went with him. Our home suddenly felt too big, too empty, and too full of memories that brought both comfort and pain. Our son Travis is 42 now, a good man at heart, though sometimes lacking the backbone I wish Frank had instilled in him. He works as an accountant at a local firm, steady and reliable in his career, if not always in standing up for himself. When Frank died, Travis suggested I sell the house and move in with him and his family. At the time, I was drowning in grief, and the idea of being surrounded by family, especially my grandchildren, seemed like the only life raft available. Travis had married Amanda 5 years ago. She was his second wife after his first marriage to Lily's mother ended, when Lily was just 7. When I first met Amanda, she seemed sweet enough. She worked as a real estate agent, always dressed impeccably, and seemed to make Travis happy. She was polite to me if a bit distant, but I chalked that up to normal mother-in-law dynamics. She even helped plan Frank's funeral, which I appreciated enormously during that terrible time. My grandchildren were another reason I agreed to move in. Lily, now 14, is a thoughtful girl who inherited Frank's gentle eyes and love of books. Then there are the twins, Jackson and Emma, just 4 years old and bundles of energy, who brought laughter back into my life when I desperately needed it. The financial arrangement seemed sensible at the time. I owned our family home outright, no mortgage, thanks to Frank's careful planning. Rather than sell it, I decided to let Travis and his family move in with me. They were living in a cramped apartment, and with the twins growing, they needed more space. I converted our downstairs study into my bedroom to give them the upstairs, and we agreed to split the utilities and property taxes. I also contributed by cooking most meals and watching the twins, while Amanda worked showings and open houses on weekends. Looking back, I can see the warning signs I missed in those early months. How Amanda would rearrange the kitchen cabinets without asking. How she would make comments about the decor being outdated while Frank and I had chosen every piece together. How she would schedule family activities without checking if I wanted to join. Little things that on their own seemed minor, but were actually the first drops in what would become a flood. 6 months after moving in, Amanda decided to repaint the living room, changing it from the warm yellow Frank and I had loved to a stark gray that she called modern. When I expressed disappointment, she said, "My clients say neutral colors add value to a home." Travis just nodded along, avoiding conflict as usual. Then came the gradual takeover of household decisions. Amanda created a family calendar that somehow never included my bridge club meetings. She implemented a new system for groceries that often left out items I enjoyed. She enrolled the twins in a preschool program that ran during the hours I used to spend with them, explaining it would be better for their development. Travis, caught between his mother and his wife, defaulted to keeping the peace at all costs. When I would bring up concerns to him privately, he would sigh and say, "She means well, Mom. She just likes things a certain way. Can you try to be flexible?" For the kids. And I did try for the kids. I backed down from disagreements. I accepted the changes to my home. I smiled and nodded when Amanda talked over me at family gatherings. I told myself that being close to my grandchildren was worth swallowing my pride. By the time last Thanksgiving approached, I had been living with them for nearly 2 years. It was to be my first major holiday hosting since Frank died, where I felt I might actually enjoy it rather than just endure it. My grief had softened enough that I could think about making Frank's favorite stuffing without dissolving into tears. I was ready to reclaim some joy in the traditions that had defined our family for decades. The day before Thanksgiving, I pulled out my recipe cards, yellowed with age and splattered with the evidence of decades of use. As I ran my fingers over Frank's handwritten notes in the margins, I felt a flutter of excitement. Tomorrow would be a good day. I would make sure of it. Planning for Thanksgiving began 3 weeks in advance. I created my shopping list, scheduled when each dish would be prepared, and even drew a diagram of the table setting. This would be the first Thanksgiving I would host without Frank by my side, but I was determined to honor our traditions and create new memories with my grandchildren. I carefully selected a 20-pound turkey from the local butcher who had been our family's go-to for years. Mr. Peterson even remembered to set aside the extra turkey neck I always used for my special gravy, just as he had done for Frank and me for decades. When I returned home with my prized turkey, Amanda was standing in the kitchen with a notepad. "I got the turkey," I announced, proudly setting the heavy package on the counter. It was one of my responsibilities. I had happily volunteered for an important part of maintaining my role in the family. Amanda barely looked up. "I revised the menu," she said, sliding a typed list across the counter. "We need to accommodate the paleo diet. Jessica and Paul are trying it." Jessica and Paul were Amanda's friends, not family, but somehow they had made it onto the guest list. I scanned the revised menu with growing dismay. Gone were my sweet potato casserole with marshmallows, my cranberry relish, and Frank's famous cornbread stuffing. "But these are our family recipes," I protested. "Everyone expects them. The kids love the sweet potatoes." Amanda sighed, as if I was being unreasonable. "Nobody eats that sugary stuff anymore, Aubrey. And we need to be mindful of healthier options." She glanced pointedly at my midsection before turning away. The comment stung, but I tried to compromise. "What if I make both my traditional dishes and your paleo options?" Travis walked in at that moment, catching the tension in the air. "What's going on?" "Your mother doesn't approve of the menu changes," Amanda said before I could speak. "I just want to make sure everyone has options, especially with your cholesterol numbers, Travis." I watched my son's face fall at the mention of his recent physical results, a low blow that effectively ended the conversation. "I'm sure whatever you both decide will be delicious," he mumbled, retreating to his home office. The next disagreement came over seating arrangements. For years, Frank had sat at the head of the table with me at the opposite end. After his passing, I had naturally assumed I would take his place as the head of the household. I found Amanda rearranging my carefully placed name cards the night before Thanksgiving. She had moved me to the middle of one side, placing herself at the head of the table. "I thought I would sit there," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "Oh, but it's easier for me to get up and serve from that position," she replied without meeting my eyes. "And you know how your hip has been bothering you. This way you won't have to get up as much." It was true my hip ached sometimes, but it felt like yet another excuse to diminish my role. Before I could respond, I overheard a conversation from the pantry where Amanda was talking on her phone, not realizing I was nearby. "No, it's fine," she was saying, her voice hushed but irritated. "Travis' mother is still insisting on making all these outdated dishes." I know. It's just one more thing I have to manage. Sometimes I wonder if we should have just put her in that senior community across town instead. Having her here is becoming such a burden." Each word felt like a physical blow, a burden. Is that what I had become to my son's family? Just an old woman taking up space? I retreated to my room, fighting back tears and telling myself that Amanda was just stressed about hosting a perfect Thanksgiving. The next morning, Amanda criticized the decorations I had put up, traditional cornucopias and pilgrim figurines that had been part of our family Thanksgiving for generations. "These look a bit tacky, don't you think?" she said, replacing my decorations with minimalist white pumpkins and eucalyptus sprigs she had bought without telling me. "The old decorations are kind of fire hazards anyway." Throughout the preparations, I noticed Amanda making comments about my eating habits. When I sampled the stuffing to check the seasoning, she remarked, "Careful, their calories still count, even when you're cooking." When I reached for a cookie from the plate I had baked for the grandchildren, she said, "Should you be having those? You mentioned your doctor was concerned about your sugar levels." I had mentioned no such thing. My last physical had been excellent for a woman my age, but Amanda had created this narrative about my health that painted me as frail and in decline. Despite all this, I pushed down my feelings and focused on creating a beautiful holiday. When Thanksgiving morning arrived, I woke up early, put on my favorite holiday apron that Frank had given me years ago, and headed to the kitchen, determined to make this a day to remember for all the right reasons. Thanksgiving morning arrived with the crisp promise of a perfect holiday. I was up before sunrise, my hands moving through the familiar rhythms of holiday preparation that had been part of my life for over 40 years. The kitchen filled with the scent of sage and onions as I prepared Frank's stuffing recipe, the one his mother had taught me when we were first married. I felt a bittersweet pang as I worked missing Frank, but feeling his presence in every tradition I maintained. When I slipped the turkey into the oven at 7 o'clock, I whispered, "This one's for you, my love," as I had done every Thanksgiving morning of our marriage. By 10, the twins were up and eager to help. Emma and Jackson perched on stools at the counter, their small hands carefully placing pecans on top of the sweet potato casserole. Even Lily emerged from her typical teenage seclusion to help roll out pie crusts, a skill I had taught her when she was just tall enough to reach the counter. For these precious morning hours, it felt like the Thanksgiving of my dreams. Amanda was busy with last-minute errands, and Travis was setting up extra chairs in the dining room. The kitchen was my domain again, filled with laughter and the organized chaos of family cooking. Around noon, guests began to arrive. Travis' cousins, Kate and Michael, came with their children. Amanda's parents, Gerald and Patricia, arrived with expensive wine and critical glances at my holiday decorations. Last to arrive were Amanda's friends, Jessica and Paul, who immediately launched into detailed explanations of their paleo lifestyle to anyone who would listen. As I carried the turkey to the dining room table at 2 o'clock, I felt a surge of pride. Despite everything I had created this beautiful meal, the table looked stunning with my grandmother's lace tablecloth and the good china that Frank and I had received as wedding gifts. Even Amanda had grudgingly complimented the centerpiece I had arranged. When everyone gathered around the table, Travis stood to carve the turkey as Frank had always done. For a moment, my heart filled with warmth, seeing my son step into his father's role. Amanda sat at the head of the table, but in that moment it didn't matter as much. The meal began wonderfully. Dishes were passed, compliments flowed, and even Amanda's parents seemed to be enjoying my traditional recipes. I watched with satisfaction as Jessica, despite her paleo proclamations, took a generous helping of my cranberry relish. I filled my plate modestly, though everything looked delicious. Years of hosting had taught me that the joy was in watching others enjoy the food I'd prepared. Still, I looked forward to savoring each bite, especially the stuffing that tasted like holidays and memories. As I raised my fork to take my first bite of turkey, Amanda commented from across the table, "Aubrey, are you sure you need such a big piece of dark meat? It's so high in fat." I felt my cheeks flush but smiled and continued eating. Around me, conversation momentarily paused, then resumed. I took a small spoonful of mashed potatoes, conscious now of eyes that might be watching my plate. Halfway through the meal, I was enjoying a bite of stuffing, closing my eyes briefly to savor the familiar taste when I felt something tug at my plate. I opened my eyes to see Amanda standing beside me, her hand firmly gripping the edge of my china plate, pulling it away from me. "You've had enough, Grandma," she announced loudly enough for the entire table to hear. "We're not running a retirement buffet here." The table fell silent. My fork clattered against the wood as it fell from my suddenly nerveless fingers. I stared at Amanda, unable to process what was happening as she removed my half-eaten meal and walked toward the kitchen. "I think Grandma needs to watch her figure," she continued, her voice carrying back to the shocked table. "Doctor said so, right, Travis?" My son sat frozen, his face a mask of discomfort, saying nothing to contradict this blatant lie about medical advice that had never been given. I looked around the table. Travis' cousins avoided my eyes. Lily's face was bright red, her gaze fixed on her plate. The twins looked confused. Amanda's parents exchanged glances but said nothing. Jessica and Paul seemed fascinated by this unexpected holiday drama. In that moment, I felt like I had been stripped naked in front of everyone I loved. The humiliation burned through me, followed by a wave of anger so intense it frightened me. "I think that's uncalled for, Amanda Travis," finally said his voice barely above a whisper. "Mom can eat what she wants." His weak defense came too late, and did nothing to erase what had happened. Amanda returned to the table without my plate, seamlessly changing the subject to holiday shopping plans, as if she hadn't just publicly humiliated me. I sat there, hands trembling in my lap, unable to speak or move. The conversation gradually resumed around me, though noticeably subdued. After what felt like an eternity but was probably only minutes, I stood up. "Excuse me," I managed to say, my voice sounding distant to my own ears. I walked slowly from the dining room back straight, refusing to show how deeply I was hurt. As I closed my bedroom door behind me, I heard laughter resume at the table. The holiday continued without me, as if I was already gone. Sitting on the edge of my bed, I could hear the muffled sounds of the gathering continuing. Plates being cleared, dessert being served, life going on while I sat alone with my humiliation. For the first time since Frank died, I felt truly alone. Not just alone, but erased, as if my place in my own family had been taken from me as easily as that plate had been snatched from my hands. Sleep eluded me that night. I lay awake, replaying the moment over and over, seeing Amanda's manicured hand pulling away my plate, hearing her voice announce to everyone that it had enough. Each recollection brought a fresh wave of shame that burned as intensely as it had in the moment. By morning, I had expected at least Travis would come check on me, perhaps offer an apology for not defending me more strongly. But breakfast passed with no knock on my door. When I finally emerged around 10, the house was quiet, except for the twins playing in the family room. "Where is everyone?" I asked Lily, who was supervising her half-siblings while texting on her phone. "Dad and Amanda went Black Friday shopping," she replied without looking up. Then, after a pause, she added, "What Amanda did yesterday was really mean, Grandma. I told Dad so." Her small act of loyalty brought tears to my eyes. "Thank you, sweetheart," was all I could manage. I spent the day cleaning up the Thanksgiving aftermath, putting away leftovers that no one had offered to share with me, washing the china that had been haphazardly loaded in the dishwasher, despite my explicit instructions for hand washing. When Travis and Amanda returned, laden with shopping bags, neither mentioned the incident. Travis gave me an awkward pat on the shoulder before carrying packages upstairs. Amanda busied herself reorganizing the refrigerator, discarding some of my carefully stored leftovers to make room for containers of juice cleanse liquids. The cold shoulder treatment continued through the weekend. By Monday, it became clear that no apology would be forthcoming. Instead, a new normal began to establish itself in the house, one where my presence was increasingly marginalized. Amanda began rearranging the kitchen cabinets, moving items I used regularly to high shelves. I couldn't reach without a step stool. When I politely asked why, she replied, "I need the accessible spaces for things we use every day, not occasionally." We. Not including me. The following week, I came downstairs one morning to find furniture had been moved in the living room. My reading chair, the one Frank had given me for our 30th anniversary, had been relocated to a dark corner away from the window where I had always enjoyed my morning coffee. "We need to make the space more open concept," Amanda explained when I asked. "Your chair was blocking the flow. Besides, too much direct sunlight isn't good for your skin at your age." Each day brought new small indignities. Amanda began scheduling family dinners when she knew I had my bridge club. She started doing laundry on the days I had always done mine, meaning I often found the machines running when I needed them. Most painful was how she began limiting my time with the grandchildren. She enrolled the twins in additional activities that took place during times I had traditionally watched them. She began suggesting that Lily was too old to spend so much time with her grandmother and needed more peer interaction. One evening, about 2 weeks after Thanksgiving, I overheard a conversation that chilled me to the bone. I was heading upstairs to retrieve a book when I heard Amanda and Travis talking in their bedroom, the door slightly ajar. "I think it's time we seriously consider some options for your mother," Amanda was saying. "She's becoming more difficult to accommodate." "What do you mean options?" Travis asked, his voice weary. "Senior living facilities. I picked up some brochures today. Look, this one has a special memory care unit." Mom doesn't have memory problems, Travis protested weakly. Not yet, Amanda replied. But it's only a matter of time. Don't you think it's better to be prepared? Besides, she'll have people her own age to socialize with. It's lonely for her here. I backed away silently, heart pounding. That night, while everyone slept, I searched Amanda's desk in the home office. Hidden in a folder labeled Family Planning were glossy brochures for assisted living facilities, one with senior transition planning checklist already partially filled out in Amanda's neat handwriting. The situation continued to deteriorate. Amanda began having her friends over more frequently, women from her real estate office who would whisper and stop talking when I entered a room. Once I clearly heard one ask, "Is that the mother-in-law you were telling us about?" as I walked past the living room. "Is the old lady giving you trouble?" another asked Amanda during a lunch gathering, not realizing I was in the adjacent room. I heard Amanda sigh dramatically in response. "You have no idea. I'm practically running a retirement home without getting paid for it." Their laughter cut through me like a knife. By mid-December, I was essentially confined to my bedroom and the kitchen during designated hours. The Christmas decorations went up without my input. Decades of family ornaments left in boxes in the basement. While Amanda festooned the house with color-coordinated silver and blue baubles that looked like they belonged in a department store display, not a family home. Travis was working late most evenings, allegedly on year-end accounting projects. When he was home, he avoided being alone with me, as if afraid of what I might say. The one time I tried to bring up my concerns, he interrupted with, "Can we not do this during the holidays, Mom can't? We just have peace for once." Peace, it seemed, meant my silent acceptance of being erased from my own home and family. The final straw came 3 days before Christmas. Exhausted from the emotional strain, and feeling physically unwell from stress and poor sleep, I had spent most of the day in bed. When I went to my dresser to find a clean nightgown, I noticed something missing from the top of the bureau. The silver-framed wedding photo of Frank and me had been removed. I searched frantically, finally finding it buried in a drawer face down under some scarves. The glass was cracked across Frank's smiling face. Something inside me broke at that moment, but something else, something stronger, began to form in its place. A resolve that had been dormant since Frank's death stirred to life. That night I lay awake, planning, not just reacting. This house had been my home for 40 years. Frank and I had built it together, raised our son here, planted the maple trees in the front yard, celebrated 4 decades of holidays within these walls. I would not be erased from it without a fight. By morning, I knew exactly what I needed to do. The day after finding my wedding photo damaged and hidden away, I made a phone call that would change everything. With shaking hands, I dialed Harold Greenberg's number. Harold had been Frank's attorney and friend for 30 years, handling our will, our taxes, and every legal question that had ever arisen. "Aubrey, it's been too long," Harold answered warmly. "How are you holding up?" "I need your help, Harold," I said, keeping my voice low, though I was alone in the house. Everyone was at Amanda's office, Christmas party, an event to which I had not been invited. "Is there any way I could see you today, privately?" To his credit, Harold didn't ask questions. "Come by at 4, he said. "I'll make sure we aren't disturbed." I took a taxi to his office downtown, not wanting to ask Travis for a ride and face questions. Harold greeted me with a grandfatherly hug and led me to his office, where a cup of tea was already waiting, prepared the way I liked it. For the first hour, I simply talked. I told him everything from the initial small slights to the Thanksgiving plate incident to finding my wedding photo. Harold listened without interruption, taking occasional notes, his face growing increasingly concerned. "First things first," he said when I finished. "Let's clarify your legal position." He pulled out a file labeled Williams, Frank, and Aubrey and flipped through several documents. "The house is solely in your name," he confirmed. "After Frank's passing, the deed transferred completely to you as per your joint ownership agreement." He looked up, eyes serious. "They have no legal right to push you out of your own home, Aubrey. None whatsoever." The relief that washed over me was profound. "But what about the brochures? The plans I overheard?" Harold leaned forward. "Listen to me. Without your consent, they cannot place you in any facility. Period. He tapped the desk for emphasis. Now let's talk about your financial situation because that will determine your options. This conversation revealed another surprise. In addition to the house, I had Frank's life insurance policy, our joint savings, and most importantly, an investment portfolio I'd almost forgotten about. Frank had started investing small amounts early in our marriage, and over 40 years those investments had grown substantially. You are not financially dependent on Travis, and Amanda Harold assured me. You have options. With this knowledge bolstering my confidence, I spent the next week secretly preparing. I called my old friend Margaret, who had been trying to get me to join her senior apartment complex since Frank died. Do you still have a unit available in your building? I asked. The one across the hall just opened up, she replied excitedly. It's perfect, Aubry. We could be neighbors. Are you finally considering it? I just might be, I told her. But first, I have some family business to resolve. Next, I consulted with Dr. Reynolds, a family therapist I'd seen briefly after Frank's death. I explained the situation and asked for her professional opinion. What you're describing is emotional elder abuse, Aubrey, she said plainly. It's unfortunately common even among families with no prior history of abusive behavior. The combination of caregiver, stress, financial concerns, and changing family dynamics can create toxic situations. So I'm not overreacting, I asked, still doubting myself despite everything. Not at all, she replied firmly. In fact, your response has been remarkably measured given the circumstances. Setting boundaries now is not just healthy for you, it's ultimately better for everyone involved, including your grandchildren who are witnessing how their mother treats their grandmother. Armed with legal knowledge and professional validation, I began documenting everything. I kept a detailed journal of incidents, comments, and changes to household routines that affected me. I took photos of my belongings that had been moved or altered. I recorded dates and times when I was excluded from family activities. I also researched senior rights and resources, familiarizing myself with terms like elder abuse and caregiver burnout. I wanted to understand the situation from all angles, even trying to see things from Amanda's perspective, though her actions had deeply hurt me. The hardest part was planning a conversation with Travis. I loved my son dearly, and I knew that beneath his passive exterior was a good man who was simply caught in an impossible situation. One afternoon, when Amanda had taken the kids shopping, I asked him to join me for coffee in the backyard, a neutral space where we could talk privately. Travis seemed nervous as he sat across from me at the patio table Frank had built. I think he sensed that I wasn't going to let things slide this time. Travis, I need to ask you something important, and I need you to be honest with me. I began gently. Are you happy with how things are going in this house? He stared into his coffee cup, avoiding my eyes. Things are complicated, Mom. I'm asking about your happiness, not the complications, I pressed. After a long pause, he looked up, his eyes damp. I'm not happy, but I don't know what to do. If I stand up to Amanda too much, she threatens to take the kids and leave. She says she'll get full custody because I'm always working. I can't lose my children, Mom. I just can't. His confession broke my heart, but also confirmed what I had suspected. My son was being emotionally manipulated just as I was. Why didn't you say anything after Thanksgiving? I asked. When she took my plate, he looked ashamed. I should have. I know I should have. But afterward, she convinced me that it was for your health, that your doctor had recommended portion control. When I finally called your doctor myself last week to confirm, he said no such conversation ever happened. She lied to me, Mom. I reached across the table and took his hand. We need to make some changes, Travis. Not just for me, but for you and the children, too. For the first time in months, we had an honest conversation. Travis admitted feeling trapped between his love for his mother and his fear of losing his wife and children. I shared my discoveries about my financial independence and legal rights to the house. Together, we developed a plan. Travis would support whatever decision I made about the living situation, and in return, I would help him consult with a family law attorney about his parental rights should the worst happen, and Amanda follow through on her threats. By the end of December, I had all my pieces in place. I had consulted professionals, documented the situation, thoroughly secured my financial resources, and reconnected with my support network of old friends. I had explored housing alternatives and knew exactly what my rights were regarding my own home. Most importantly, I had reclaimed my sense of self-worth. No longer was I the confused widow willing to accept mistreatment in exchange for proximity to family. I was Aubrey Williams, a woman who had weathered 67 years of life's storms and was still standing strong. I chose New Year's Day for the confrontation. New beginnings seemed appropriate for what I had planned. New Year's Day dawned clear and cold. I had slept surprisingly well, the peace that comes with absolute certainty about one's path. I dressed carefully in an outfit Frank had always loved, a deep blue dress that brought out my eyes, and a pearl necklace he had given me for our 40th anniversary. I'd asked Travis to ensure everyone would be home for a special New Year's lunch, including Amanda's parents, Gerald and Patricia. He hadn't questioned my request, seeming to understand that something significant was about to happen. I spent the morning cooking, finding joy in the familiar routines of the kitchen that had been my domain for decades. I prepared all our family favorites, a deliberate contrast to the Thanksgiving meal that had been taken from me. My special pot roast, Frank's favorite mashed potatoes, the green bean casserole Lily loved, and even homemade dinner rolls that the twins would pull apart with delighted fingers. By 1 o'clock, everyone was seated at the dining room table. Amanda looked irritated at not being consulted about the menu, but maintained a polite facade in front of her parents. The twins were excited by the special occasion feel of an unexpected formal lunch. Lily watched me with curious eyes, sensing something was different about her grandmother today. I waited until everyone had been served and had taken their first few bites, compliments flowing about the tenderness of the roast and the perfect seasoning of the potatoes. Then I gently tapped my water glass with a spoon, the crystal ringing clearly through the room. "I have something I need to say to all of you." I began, my voice steadier than I had expected. The table fell silent, all eyes turning to me. 3 months ago, I was sitting at this table celebrating Thanksgiving with my family when something happened that changed everything for me. I looked directly at Amanda, whose expression shifted from surprise to wariness. My daughter-in-law publicly took my plate away and announced that I'd had enough to eat, likening my home to a retirement buffet. Amanda's parents exchanged uncomfortable glances. Gerald cleared his throat, while Patricia suddenly became very interested in her napkin. "Mom, is this really necessary?" Travis started, but I held up my hand. "Yes, it is necessary," I said firmly. Because that moment was just one example of a pattern of behavior that has been happening in this house for months now. Methodically, I described the progression of events since moving in with Travis and Amanda. The gradual restrictions on my movements in my own home. The comments about my age and health. The exclusion from family activities. The discovery of assisted living brochures. As I spoke, I retrieved a folder I'd placed on the sideboard and began distributing copies of documents. A copy of the house deed with my name clearly listed as sole owner. Bank statements showing my financial independence. A printed log of incidents I'd documented over the past month. "I created this home with my husband," I continued. "Frank and I built it, paid for it, and filled it with love and memories for over 40 years. We raised Travis here, planted the garden outside, celebrated countless holidays within these walls." I turned to face Amanda directly. "I welcomed you into this home when you married my son. I stepped aside to give you space to create your own family traditions. I helped with your children and contributed financially to this household. And in return, you've systematically tried to erase me from my own home." Amanda stood abruptly, her chair scraping loudly. "This is ridiculous. You're twisting everything to make me look bad. Tell her, Travis. Tell her how difficult she's been." But Travis didn't jump to her defense this time. Instead, he looked at his wife with new eyes, as if seeing her clearly for the first time. "Harold, my attorney has prepared this document." I continued, sliding a formal letter across the table. "It's a notice requiring you, Amanda, to vacate this property within 30 days. The silence that followed was absolute. Even the twins, sensing the tension, had stopped fidgeting. "You can't do this," Amanda finally sputtered. "This is my home too." "Actually, no, it isn't," I replied calmly. As these documents show, I am the sole legal owner. You have been a guest in my home, one who has increasingly overstayed her welcome." Amanda turned to Travis, her face flushed with anger. "Are you going to let her do this? Choose between your mother and your wife?" Travis looked pained but resolute. "I can't choose between my mother and my wife," he said slowly. "But I can choose between right and wrong. And what's been happening in this house is wrong, Amanda. I should have said something sooner." Amanda looked around the table, seeking an ally. Her eyes landed on her father. "Dad." Gerald shifted uncomfortably. "Amanda, honey, some of the things Aubrey has described, they don't reflect how your mother and I raised you." "So you're taking her side too?" Amanda demanded, her voice rising. Patricia finally spoke up. "It's not about sides, Amanda. It's about respect." She reached across the table to touch my hand briefly. "I owe you an apology, Aubrey. I saw what happened at Thanksgiving, and I said nothing. That was wrong of me." Amanda, looking increasingly cornered, switched tactics. "Fine. If that's how you all feel, then Travis and I will take the children and move out. Today. Travis can stay if he wishes, I clarified. So can the children. My issue is specifically with your behavior, Amanda, not with my son or my grandchildren." From the end of the table came a small voice. "I'd like to stay with Grandma." It was Lily speaking for the first time. Everyone turned to look at her. "You don't get to decide that," Amanda snapped. "Actually, I kind of do," Lily replied with surprising firmness. "I'm 14 and in family court they listen to what kids my age want." She met my eyes across the table. "I want to stay with Dad and Grandma." The look of pure rage that crossed Amanda's face was frightening. "You ungrateful little. After everything I've done for you?" Like what Lily challenged. Taking away Grandma's plate, moving her chair, hiding her wedding photo, I saw you do all those things. Amanda looked from face to face, realizing she had no supporters left at the table. With a sound of frustration, she threw her napkin down and stormed out of the dining room. Moments later, we heard the front door slam and her car engine start. The twins began to cry, confused by the tension and their mother's abrupt departure. I moved to comfort them, gathering them into my arms, as Travis sat in stunned silence. Amanda's parents looked at me apologetically. "We're very sorry about all this," Aubrey Gerald said. "We've noticed changes in Amanda over the past few years, but we've been at a loss about how to address them." The rest of the afternoon was spent in difficult but necessary conversations. Travis called Amanda repeatedly, but she didn't answer. Her parents eventually left to try to find her, promising to help however they could to resolve the situation peacefully. As evening fell, the house felt different. Lighter somehow, despite the uncertainty that hung in the air. The twins had calmed down after Travis assured them that everyone still loved them and that adult problems weren't their fault. Lily had hugged me fiercely before going to her room, whispering, "I'm proud of you, Grandma." That night, as I prepared for bed, I looked at Frank's repaired photograph, now back in its proper place on my dresser. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be difficult conversations, possibly even legal battles if Amanda contested the eviction. But for the first time in months, I felt like myself again. Strong, determined, whole. Whatever came next, I would face it, standing tall in the home. Frank and I had built surrounded by those who truly loved and respected me. The weeks following the New Year's Day confrontation were among the most difficult of my life, second only to losing Frank. Amanda initially refused to communicate, except through increasingly hostile text messages to Travis. She stayed with her parents, who, to their credit, encouraged her to seek professional help for what they now recognized as controlling behavior that had been escalating over time. Travis was devastated but resolute. At night, after the children were asleep, we'd sit in the kitchen with cups of tea, processing the pain and confusion together. "I never saw it clearly until now," he confessed one evening. "How she gradually isolated me from friends, controlled our finances, made threats about the kids." He looked up, his eyes hollow with realization. "It's like I've been in a fog for years." "A therapist would call that emotional abuse," I said gently. "It's not just something that happens to older women like me." Travis began seeing a counselor specializing in manipulative relationships, slowly rebuilding his confidence, and learning to establish healthy boundaries. The change in him was remarkable. Day by day, I watched my son emerge from his shell, becoming more like the strong, kind man his father and I had raised. By February, after extensive negotiations through our respective attorneys, Amanda agreed to the divorce terms Travis offered. She would have joint legal custody and regular visitation with the twins, while Lily, who had adamantly refused to live with her stepmother, would remain primarily with Travis. In exchange, Travis offered a generous financial settlement that would allow Amanda to purchase her own home. The day Amanda came to collect, her belongings was tense but controlled. Harold had advised me to be absent, so I spent the day with Margaret at her senior apartment complex, playing cards and trying not to worry about what was happening in my home. When I returned that evening, Travis met me at the door with a tired smile. "It's done, Mom." She took her things and left the keys. Walking through the house, I could feel the difference immediately. Spaces that had been taken over by Amanda's aesthetic were now empty, waiting to be reclaimed. The stark gray walls, she had insisted on the modern furniture, that had never felt comfortable, the cold, decorative elements that had replaced family photographs, all gone. "It's like the house can breathe again," Lily observed as we stood in the half-empty living room. I knew exactly what she meant. Over the coming months, we rebuilt our home and our family. I invited Travis and the children to help redecorate, wanting them to feel ownership of the space, too. We kept some modern touches that the kids liked, while bringing back the warmth and personality that made a house truly a home. The twins adjusted better than Wed feared. At 4 years old, they were resilient, especially with consistent routines and plenty of love. We established regular video calls with Amanda, and Travis faithfully took them for their scheduled visits with their mother. Lily blossomed in the healthier household environment. She began bringing friends over again, something she'd rarely done during Amanda's tenure. One afternoon, I overheard her proudly giving a tour to her best friend. "And this is my grandma's famous kitchen," she was saying. "She makes the best cookies in Massachusetts and teaches me all her secret recipes." Her words warmed my heart more than she could know. My own healing took longer. For months, I would hesitate before serving myself food when others were present. I'd catch myself making self-deprecating comments about my age or abilities. Echoes of Amanda's subtle undermining. Old habits of making myself small to avoid criticism were hard to break. Dr. Reynolds, whom I'd continued seeing for support, helped me recognize these patterns. "What happened to you was a form of abuse, Aubrey," she reminded me. "It takes time to fully recover your sense of self." Gradually, I reclaimed not just my home, but my life outside it. I rejoined my bridge club, reconnected with old friends, and even started volunteering at the local library, reading to children during Saturday story hours. I joined a senior yoga class that Margaret had been telling me about for years, surprised by how much I enjoyed the gentle movement and the companionship of women my age. Travis established his own boundaries, with Amanda refusing to engage when she attempted to manipulate him through the children or mutual acquaintances. He began dating again that summer, cautiously, but with a new awareness of healthy relationship dynamics. When Thanksgiving approached again, I felt a knot of anxiety forming. The holiday held complicated memories now, shadows of humiliation mingled with the decades of happy celebrations that had preceded Amanda's cruelty. "What if we create a completely new tradition this year?" Travis suggested, sensing my unease. "Something that honors our family history but isn't tied to those difficult memories." Together with the children, we planned a Thanksgiving weekend at a cabin in the Berkshires. Instead of a formal dinner with all the traditional trimmings, we had a casual feast of everyone's favorites. The twins requested macaroni and cheese alongside the turkey. Lily wanted to try making a chocolate pecan pie instead of the traditional pumpkin. Travis suggested we eat in our pajamas. As we sat around the rustic table in that cozy cabin, I looked at my family's smiling faces and felt a profound sense of gratitude, not just for what we had, but for what we had overcome. The most important lesson I learned through all of this, I told them as we shared what we were thankful for, is that standing up for yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. Not just for your own sake, but for the people who truly love you. Lily reached for my hand across the table. "I'm thankful you taught me that, Grandma, that it's never too late to draw the line and say enough." By spring, our new normal felt comfortable and right. The house had been completely redecorated, blending cherished family pieces with fresh elements that reflected all our tastes. Photographs of Frank were prominently displayed again, alongside new pictures of our evolving family. The walls were once more a warm yellow that caught the morning light, just as Frank and I had planned 40 years earlier. One Sunday morning, as I prepared a big family breakfast, something I now did every weekend, I realized I was humming to myself. The simple joy of cooking for loved ones in my own kitchen, moving freely through my own home, making decisions large and small without fear of criticism or control, it was all mine again. Travis came downstairs and poured himself coffee, leaning against the counter to watch me work. "You seem happy, Mom," he observed. "I am," I replied, realizing the truth of it deep in my bones. Really am." Later that day, as we all sat around the dinner table, I looked at each face in turn. Travis stronger and more confident than had been in years. Lily growing into a thoughtful young woman with a strong sense of justice. The twins secure in the knowledge that they were loved unconditionally by the adults in their life. This was what Frank and I had built together, not just a house, but a legacy of love and respect that would continue long after we were gone. In standing up for myself, I hadn't just reclaimed my home. It ensured that our family's future generations would understand the importance of dignity, boundaries, and self-respect. Life has a way of teaching us its most important lessons when we least expect them, and sometimes in the most painful ways. At 67, I thought I'd learned most of what life had to teach. Instead, I discovered that it's never too late to stand up for yourself, to reclaim your power, to insist on being treated with dignity. The plate that Amanda snatched from my hands, that Thanksgiving, became a symbol of everything she tried to take from me: my place in my family, my home, my sense of self-worth. In snatching back not just my house but my very identity, I discovered a strength I didn't know I still possessed. As for you watching this now, I wonder what in your life needs to be reclaimed. What boundaries need to be drawn? Remember, it's never too late to stand up and say enough. Don't wait for someone else to give you permission to take up space in your own life. If my story resonated with you, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. Leave a comment about a time you had to reclaim your power, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories of resilience and growth. Thank you for listening, and remember, every single one of us deserves to be treated with dignity and respect, no matter our age.